The first thing I like to discuss when we talk about percents and decimals is what is the difference and how do you tell between a number that's a percentage and a number that's a decimal. Any numbers that have a percentage sign are percents. So for example, 100%, 29%, 2.04%. Now look at that one, it has a decimal point in it. So you'd think, isn't that a decimal? Well, yes, but it's a percentage. We're talking about 2.04% of something because it has a percent sign after. That's the only way you tell if something is a percent already or not. Something is what we call a decimal. It's in its decimal form if it doesn't have a percentage sign by it. So these are all the decimal way of writing the number. So what happens if there is no decimal point in a number? So for example, right here, 67, there's no decimal point there. If there's no decimal point in a number, it's assumed right after it. So in 8, there would be a decimal point right here. In this 18%, there's actually a decimal point right there, right after the 18. So the only way to tell between a percent and a decimal is if it has a percentage sign after it. I want to talk about the word percent for a minute. Percent means parts of 100. So 36% means 36 parts of 100. Another way to think about it is to split up this word. Per means in math to divide. And cent is kind of like century. Century is 100 years. Cent, so 100. So per 100, divide by 100. So 36% means 36 divided by 100. If we change that to decimal form, it would be 0.36. At this time, the only work that we're going to do with percents is working on changing between the forms, the decimal, percent, and a fraction. So to change from a decimal to a percentage, you move the decimal place 2 places to the right, or multiply by 100. So for example, 0.23, you take that decimal place and you move it 2 places to the right. So that would be 23, and then the decimal point would be right there, 23%. So 0.23 as a decimal is the same thing as 23%. 0.6. Again, take that decimal point and move it 2 places to the right. 1, 2. Now in that empty space, put a 0. So 0.6 is 60%. To go the other way, to change from a percent to a decimal, move the decimal places 2 places to the left, or divide by 100. So for example, 42%, the decimal point is currently right there. We want to move it 2 places left. Boom, boom. 42% is 0.42. You might ask, why do we have to do this? Whenever you do math with percentages and figure out problems, you have to change it to a decimal before you do the arithmetic. 80%. Decimal point is currently right there. To change it to a decimal, we move 2 places left. 80% would be the same as 0.8. Going between fractions and decimals. We did this last module, so this should be a review. To change from a fraction to a decimal, you simply do top divided by bottom. On a calculator, 5 divided by 8. Or by hand, 5 goes under the house, and it's divided by 8. So 5 divided by 8 on a calculator, 0.625. 2/3, 2 divided by 3, or 2 divided by 3 by hand. On a calculator, when you do 2 divided by 3, you you get 0.66666 and then a 7 at the end, right? What this actually means is 0.6 repeating. Means 6 is on and on forever and ever and ever. What your calculator did here was round it. They rounded their last digit to a 7 so as to round it to the nearest 10 digits or whatever they could fit on their calculator screen. So you could write your answer like this, 0.6 repeating. This little bar above it means repeating. Or you could round too. Maybe you want to round to 2 decimal places, 0.67. Either way, 2/3 is 0.66666 repeating. To change from a decimal to a fraction, there are a few tricks here to use. One trick is just to say the proper name of the decimal. For example, if you have 0.7, that 7 is in the tenths place. So just say it, 7/10. There you go, 7/10. And you'd reduce if you could. Here, 0.24. Well, this is the tenths place, and this is the hundredths place. So that's 24 hundredths. So there you go, 24 hundredths. You would need to reduce that. If I divide both top and bottom by 4, I get 6/25. 0.111. Well, here's the tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place. So this is 111 thousandths. My trick will not work if you have repeating decimals like this. Those are a little harder to change back into fractions. There are some patterns that you can use to help you, or I've put a link here on another way to change repeating decimals into fractions if you're curious. This will not be on your test, but it is there if you would like to look at it. To change between fractions and percents, you combine the things that we've already done. So 5/8. To change that into a percent, first go to a decimal. So do 5 divided by 8. So now we've changed that fraction into a decimal. Now go from the decimal to the percent. So move your decimal place 2 spots to the right. So that's 62.5%. Same thing, 2/3. Make it into a fraction first. 2 divided by 3 is 0.6 repeating. Now move your decimal place 2 places to the right. There are a few ways you can show this answer. You could round it. Rounded to the nearest hundredth would be 66.67%. You could use your repeating bar. 66.6 repeating percent. Or 66.6 repeating. The 0.6 repeating, that's the same as 2/3. So you could put 66 and 2/3%. Any of those is fine. To change from a percent to a fraction, first change to a decimal, and then from the decimal back to the fraction. So again, go percent to decimal, and decimal to fraction. 25%, to change that to a decimal, 0.25. You may know that 0.25 is 1/4, but if you don't, 0.25, that's 25 hundredths. So write it as a fraction, 25 hundredths. And reduce, 1/4. 70%, change to a decimal, 0.7. Change your decimal to a fraction, That's 1 decimal place, that's tenths. So we have 7 tenths.